We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot, season number 5. Yeah, we're in season number 5, episode number 5. And first and foremost, man, I hope you guys had a great weekend. It was a good, exciting week across the sporting landscape. We had college football in the play, some good games across college football. First notable one for me is a game that I checked out on Saturday, man. The great game between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Tennessee Volunteers. This is a game, especially if you're located in the Southeast. Obviously it's an SEC matchup. It's a rivalry game. Georgia's had Tennessee number over the past few years. And I thought Tennessee had a shot at winning this game, man, on Saturday. It was a very exciting football game, man, up and down the field for both teams. But Georgia was able to pull this one out, man. Good comeback win for them. Shout out to Gunnar Stockton, quarterback of the Georgia Bulldogs. Last time we seen him, most people around the country saw him in the college football playoffs when Carson Beck got injured. And, man, it went left as they was end up losing to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as they moved on to the national championship game. But I was impressed, man. It was a good college football slate. Also, we got young Manning down in Texas, man. Struggling a little bit, and this offense looked a little anemic. Now, they do have weapons down there. Steve Sarkisian, offensive coordinator extraordinaire. Thought that this offense will have a little bit more punch to it, but they start off a little sluggish, man, under Manning. And we'll see. It's a lot of hype surrounding him. I think Arch, seems like he's cool, calm, and collective, just like his uncles is and his brother. But we haven't really seen him kick into gear just yet, man. So we'll see what it do. I thought that was just a little bit interesting as well on just the college football front. But who we all kidding, man? We had NFL week number 2 jump off. I'm going to get into that, man. Just all the games across the slate. But before I take a little bit into the National Football League, we had a super fight this weekend, people. Super fight between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Bud Crawford. The 168 range, super middleweight range, where Canelo Alvarez has been king for roughly about 7 or 8 years, just holding it down, holding that division down. Thought it's a comfort zone division for him. I thought he ran out of opponents really pretty much in the division itself. And Bud stepped up to the plate. Now, for me, it was a situation with Bud. I've been watching Bud a very long time. And I'm not one to kind of, stick my chest out on it, but I was watching Bud, man, before he was a household name. I knew that he had the tools to be a generational talent in the world of boxing. So to see him to be able to come up to 168 and handle Canelo Alvarez, as Floyd Mayweather would say, man, it's easy money. I thought a lot of people were selling him short as far as just the weight difference and him coming up in weight. Because what people forget to realize is that, one, Terrence Crawford is now in his late 30s. Meaning that naturally you're going to add a little weight on as you get a little older anyway. That's one. Two, I believe Terrence Crawford, and I think he spoke about it a little bit after the fight, he's walking around at 160 pounds. So for him, it's basically him putting on about a good 8 to 10 pounds of muscle, which, for a boxer, especially at his ilk and his age, that's not a bad thing. Meaning that it kind of gives you something to kind of look towards to when you go into your training. But he looked excellent on Saturday night. It was a great crowd out there in Las Vegas in Allegiant Stadium. Over 70,000 in attendance. It was good to see, some of the people that we know, some of the celebrities, out there just out and about. And it was a good little vibe. Canelo, he was gracious in defeat. But I think that for both these gentlemen, and I'll speak to Bud obviously being the victor, to the victor goes the spoils. I think this may be the end of the road for Terrence Crawford. Now, I think he's accomplished everything he wanted to accomplish as far as, going back a little bit, destroying Errol Spence, got the unanimous, situation in the welterweight division, sold that up, then went up to super middleweight and sold that up. So there's really nobody else to fight other than, I think the best fight down the pipeline would be Errol Spence Part 2. Now, there's a lot of people that don't have a lot of confidence in Errol Spence, since his defeat. He's been able to bounce back and win a couple fights. But he's lost a little bit of his stature and a little bit of his swag. And so I'm not sure if his camp really want that fight. But from a fan standpoint, That's the fight that basically is going to draw the most interest with Terrence Bud Crawford. And I wouldn't be surprised if he walk into the sunset, but we've seen a lot of boxers hang out in the ring a little longer than what they need to hang out in the ring. So we'll see what that do moving forward. And as I mentioned, we have week number 2 in the National Football League. And I'm just going to put a little cap on week number 2 with saying that this was the get hurt week, especially if you're a quarterback. You know, we got Brock Purdy, who, didn't play on Sunday. Shout out to Mac Jones, who came in and did an outstanding job for the 49ers being able to pull off their victory. We had Joe Burrow go out, with the turf toe injury. Looks like he's going to be out 3 months. Joe, I wish you well, man. Wish he's able to get back on the field. And Joe, he's been a little nicked up, man, in the league since he's been in it. He had, ACL injury also dating back, to his days in college. So he's been nicked up a little bit. And what I've seen from the Cincinnati Bengals, I've watched both their games this season. The offensive line is straight trash. There's been a lot of talk about the defensive side of the Cincinnati Bengals, but the offensive line is no better because Joe was getting popped in that game before inevitably going out in the game. And, it was sad to see, man, him being out 3 months. We'll see what Jake Browning does. Jake Browning is a guy that came in a couple years ago when Joe had the little wrist situation. And he played some good ball for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's familiar with the program. I don't think it's going to hurt, that offense too bad. I mean, it's hard to replace a Joe Burrow. I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League. He's one of those guys that if you want to, get real gangster with it, he's an irreplaceable guy. But, Jake Brown is a guy that's not off the streets, a guy that's been in your program, a guy that knows your offense. Good thing about the Bengals that they didn't start off slow this year, even though they've won some ugly games. They 2-0 on the year. And so there could be brighter days for the Cincinnati Bengals, at least until Joe Burrow comes back. We'll see if they're able to kind of hold the fort down until he gets himself, back on the center for the Cincinnati Bengals. But, that's the situation. We got, a Thursday night game, which is coming up between the Washington Commanders, most notably Jaden Daniels. Looks like he's iffy for the game. So, this week number 2 has just been, a lot of quarterbacks getting nicked up, getting banged up. We had the Super Bowl rematch between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. That was a game that I was sitting back, definitely enjoying. I think that, both these ball clubs, especially with the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think they get all the respect that they deserve to get being the world champions. And, last week was a good litmus test for them to try out way to KC. KC is the walking wounded. A lot of people still have faith in the Kansas City Chiefs, but most of that faith is behind Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Let's talk about the guys on the field, because this is a team that I predicted them to lose the football game going in. I didn't think it was going to be as ugly as the Super Bowl that we saw, but when you missing that amount of talent from the offensive standpoint from the Kansas City Chiefs, 1, 2, your defense. What made that defense great, and we know Steve Spagnuolo is one of the greatest defensive coordinators of all time. He's going to bring the heat. But how the Kansas City Chiefs have been getting you over the last couple of years with their defenses, they've been able to rush 4 guys. And you got Chris Jones, part of that 4, being able to play back in coverage. And I thought that the Philadelphia Eagles, even though the game kind of started off, not a high, power type of game from an offensive standpoint, they was able to lock in, see what the Kansas City Chiefs, was doing, and was able to get that victory 20-17. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But the reason I mention that is because I think the Kansas City Chiefs is in a world of trouble. As my man Bernie Mac would say, trouble, trouble. You go down 0-2 on the season, I don't care what you have done before. And this is the reason I mentioned that, is that 1, you got injuries. 2, you can't run the ball to save your life. Patrick Mahomes has been the best runner out the backfield for this team through the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, Pacheco, he does run hard, so it's not a situation where he's lost a step per se. But I just think that team schematically got them figured out in what lanes they trying to run in. Hunt is a good addition, but Hunt is really a lunch pail type of guy. So their offense does not scare anybody, especially with Worthy being out. You don't really have a guy that can take the top off of defense. We got Rashee Rice. He'll be back, in week number 7 for the Kansas City Chiefs, so he's going to be out a minute. And so, yeah, I'm very concerned because when I look at the schedule of the Kansas City Chiefs, they got the Washington Commanders coming up. They got the Baltimore Ravens coming up. They play the Buffalo Bills, all before we get to week 9 of the year. So that AFC West is another prediction that I made is the Los Angeles Chargers division to lose. And shout out to them getting that victory last night against the Las Vegas Raiders. So, I know they geeked up, man, being 2-0, and the front runner pretty much in the division so far in that AFC West. So now we're going to take, a nice little dive into the National Football League. Also, I'm going to do a little recap, too, on Major League Baseball as they're gearing up, man, to get into the playoff race. We also, too, got the WNBA playoffs jumped off already, man. So that thing is getting to its, heating point as far as the WNBA season is concerned. And finally, I got a Big Five. Yeah, I'm back with my Big Five of the year for the National Football League. My 5 best teams through week number 2 that I've seen across the league. So I'm going to get into that, coming up as well. But first and foremost, man, for your first time listening, man, I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide high-fire takes and analysis across the board and landscape. And if you're an OG of the show, man, I appreciate the check-in once again. You can check me out on Facebook. We on Fire Sports Podcast. On Twitter at We on Fire Sports. Also on YouTube, We on Fire Sports Podcast. And you can listen to us as well as on Breaking. Also where all podcasts can be listened to. And coming up, I'm going to break down week number 2 across the National Football League as we gear up for the fall. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. Let's get into it. NFL week number 2. There was a lot of exciting matchups in week number 2 as we was coming off the inaugural weekend of the NFL season. And things jumped off on Thursday. We had a good Thursday night matchup, man. Shout out to the National Football League, man. They've been doing a good job on them Thursday night matchups. There's been some good tilts. And the latest edition of Thursday Night Football, we had the Washington Commanders take on the Green Bay Packers. In Green Bay, in week number 1, this team looked real good on the defensive side of the ball. They obviously got Michael Parsons in the building up in Green Bay and Rashawn Gary. They look like a nice little unit on the defensive side of the ball. Jordan Love didn't turn the rock over, looking real, nice and pristine, high completion percentage. And it was the same old thing in this second slate for the Green Bay Packers as they was able to knock off the Washington Commanders 27-18. And things that, I was taking a look in this football game was, what kind of pressure can the Washington Commanders get on Jordan Love? Because, he was sitting in a lawn chair in the first week of the season, and I just wanted to see what type of heat, Dan Quinn and the Washington Commanders would be able to put on Jordan Love. Also, I wanted to see what type of running game Washington would be able to come up with. They got the new addition Bill in the backfield, and we got Austin Eckler, just a savvy veteran. But Austin Eckler went out, and this season is over with an Achilles injury. Hopefully he maybe can get back, on the football field sometime soon, man. He's an OG out here, man. So, felt real bad that, he got injured in the football game. But the Packers look good once again on the defensive side of the ball. They was able to contain Jaden Daniels, kind of kept him in the pocket most of the game and just kept, the Commanders from making those big plays. And speaking of big plays, and this guy had numerous big plays in this game, and that was Tucker Kraft for the Green Bay Packers. It just seemed like the Washington Commanders just had no idea where this guy was lining up or where he was going, but he had a huge career night for him, 124 yards and a touchdown for him. And I just loved the balance from the Green Bay Packers. They was a team that played, good offense with Jacobs as well, being able to run the football, some good receivers. They have a bunch of young receivers, just trying to kind of figure out which one going to, separate themselves from the pack. And I think that the Green Bay Packers, if they want to get to the Super Bowl this season, one of those youngins got to separate themselves from the pack and be just that stud number 1 receiver for them. So, big time game for the Green Bay Packers as they go 2-0 on the season. The Washington Commanders, they go to 1-1 on the season. So we'll see if the Commanders can bounce back. Word on the street is looking like Jaden Daniels may not play in week number 3. He's got some nagging injuries going in. And week number 2 has just been the week of the quarterback. the situation with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, having a turf toe injury. He's going to be out for about 3 months. We got, the youngin, McCarthy, J.J. McCarthy for the Minnesota Vikings. Looks like he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. We got Brock Purdy, who's presently out right now for the San Francisco 49ers. So this has been the theme, man, early in the year. Just quarterbacks just getting nicked up. And the game that, kind of caught my eye was actually a surprising game. I thought this game was going to be a dud, the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. The Cowboys were able to pull this game out in overtime. Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys look good on offense. Dallas defense is definitely taking a step back. This is a unit that, lost Micah Parsons, and they just trying to kind of find themselves. And, good first victory for Brian Schottenheimer, son of one of my favorite coaches, Marty Schottenheimer, back in the day. So congratulations to them. It was good for the Cowboys, man, to be able to pull out a tough victory, man. And the New York Giants, they just going through it right now. This is a team that, got Russell Wilson at the helm. He looked good in the game, even though he gave up the deciding touchdown. So Russ was cooking till he burnt the groceries. And the Dallas Cowboys was able to win this game 40-37 in overtime. It was a surprisingly sneaky, goody game. I didn't think I'd be able to get into this game in week number 2, but it was an exciting game, man. I was definitely checking that out, going back and forth on Red Zone on Sunday. So congratulations to the Cowboys getting their first victory of the year. Then we transition to a game that I'm not going to lie to y'all, man. This is a game that I wish to forget. My Chicago Bears traveled up to Detroit, Ford Field, take on the Detroit Lions, a big-time divisional tilt. Both these teams coming off a loss in week number 1. Both these teams losing a divisional game in week number 1. We got the homecoming of Ben Johnson, former offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. My Chicago Bears coming into this game, a lot of talent. But this defense was atrocious. This defense, I can't find the words for it, man. And, Chicago Bears fans and people who know the Chicago Bears know we're a defensive first, run the football type of organization, man. But to see a 52-piece get hung up on us, even when Detroit was cracking over the last couple of years, they ain't put 52 points up on us. And this defense, Jalen Johnson, looks like he's going to be out indefinitely. This is a season that, after the Chicago Bears breaking bread with the Pro Bowl cornerback, he hadn't been able to be really healthy for the Chicago Bears, most of the training camp as well. And this thing is ugly for the Chicago Bears. We 0-2 on the year. I'm a big-time fan, man, so I'm going to stay in the pocket for the Bears. Caleb Williams looked a little bit better in this football game than he did, the previous week. Rome Odunze having a big game, 128 yards, man, 2 touchdowns for him. Man, St. Brown, 3 touchdowns for the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff having 5 touchdowns. And it just looked like the Bears from a defensive standpoint, man, just let go the rope. Hopefully we'll see better days, man. Congratulations to the Lions as they move on 1-1 on the season. And for my Bears, it's just, I don't know, man. We'll see what it do moving forward for my Chicago Bears. Then we got the Buffalo Bills. This is a team that a lot of people think, got a chance to get to the Super Bowl. They got the reigning MVP of the National Football League and Josh Allen. We saw this team last week with a miraculous comeback victory against the Baltimore Ravens at home. Just, a crazy performance just by the whole team. Just overall good team victory for the Buffalo Bills. And a lot of people thought the Jets coming in, this was a team that, had some promise in week number 1, losing a close game to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Justin Fields, and I said this, coming into this game, is that good talent, but he's never been able to put consistent back-to-back performances up. And this game ended early for him, man, as he got injured with a possible concussion. Got out of the game, very, very early, man. The Buffalo Bills was pretty much steamrolling the Jets. I thought that the Jets would put up a fight in this game. I thought it would be a little closer. I actually had this one coming in 28-24. But Jets, especially when, your starting quarterback go out of the game with an offense just like the Buffalo Bills, it's tough sledding, man. You got to put up 30-plus points to beat this football team. And, the New York Jets, they just not in a position with that type of offense. James Cook had an outstanding game, 130 yards and 2 touchdowns for him. And Buffalo just keep on rolling, man, 2-0. It's their first, road win of the season as well. So, good things, come by, man, for teams that, stay in the pocket and stay consistent with their identity, man. So we'll see what it do for the Jets, 0-2 on the year. I seen Aaron Glenn, in the press conference. He's a resolved type of gentleman. Might be brighter days for the New York Jets, but, it's a tough NFL. And, the Jets, they got some good pieces. But to me, collectively, as far as the talent in the AFC, they just don't have the same talent as the other teams around them in the AFC, man. So it could be a long season for Jet fans this year. A game also by another AFC juggernaut. We had the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cleveland Browns. We all know the story about these two organizations. The Baltimore Ravens celebrating their 30th year as an organization. Since the whole move from Cleveland. The first go round, and Cleveland was able to bounce back and get them an organization. So it's bad blood between these two teams. It's an AFC North matchup, so it's going to be hard hitting and competitive. And the Browns, they was in the pocket in this game in the first kind of half. They was kind of hanging in there. It's a traditional, divisional foe should. But it was the turnovers. They was able to, one, sack Joe Flacco. Then they was able to get them to turn over the football. Special teams had a block punt, I believe. And so things was looking good for the Baltimore Ravens. I believe they scored like 21 points unanswered in this football game. And just really got busy, man. They just showing that, their team that the first week with the Buffalo Bills really wasn't their best footing. They was unable to close the deal just in that whole situation. But, I think that the Baltimore Ravens, they're one of those teams in the AFC, it's a tier system in the AFC, and, they one of the teams at, the top of the tier list. And so we'll see what it do moving forward. Another good game by Lamar Jackson, having 4 touchdowns in this football game. Looks like he's going to be headed to another MVP type of season for him. So we'll definitely see what it do. In this game, man, I actually watched, a little bit of this game in the second half, man. It was the Denver Broncos taking on the Indianapolis Colts. I thought the Denver Broncos had this game in the bag, man. The defense was looking good. The offense, with Bo Nix, was looking kind of good. They was able to run the football a little bit, get a little balance, on the offensive side of the ball. And the Colts, sneaky good, man. The Colts was able to grind this game out, man. Jonathan Taylor, man, 165 yards. Shout out to him. Definitely special shout out as well. You're on my fantasy football team, so I appreciate you, JT, with the performance on Sunday. And the Colts, they surprisingly 2-0, man, as they was able to beat the Denver Broncos on the last-second field goal to win that game 29-28. And Daniel Jones, a new digs for him. I talked about them a little bit last week. It's been surprising, folks, man. They 2-0 in the season. They may be, a nice little deal in the AFC, man, because, especially the AFC South is what I mean, because the Houston Texans is not really looking like the Houston Texans that we've seen, with C.J. Stroud having that outstanding first year for him. And so we'll see what it do, man. But I've been impressed, man, by the Colts. They 2-0 on the year. Broncos fall to 1-1 on the year, so they got to get that get back as well. And we got to talk about the Super Bowl rematch between the defending world champion Philadelphia Eagles and the previous, former world champion Kansas City Chiefs. The Eagles, going out the Arrowhead. Usually this would be, one of those games to where I would think that, the Kansas City Chiefs coming in got to be favored at the crib. But this is a team that is banged up, y'all. I mean, you got Xavier Worthy out with the shoulder injury. You got Rashee Rice suspended. You got a team that really don't have a running game right now. You got a team that, it's just Patrick Mahomes put on the Cape dependent type of football team. Defense is still good, but I don't think the defense is what it was when they won, the championship, 2 years ago. And we saw that. And, I said, I had my chest out, man, saying Philadelphia had their number, but Kansas City, being, the former champion that they are, they was able to play a good game and hang, say, with the Philadelphia Eagles early on. I think that just the run game for the Philadelphia Eagles, whether it be Jalen Hurts, whether it be Barkley, and they was able to, keep Barkley to a workmanlike 80 yards. I thought that they didn't give up the big plays, but Philadelphia don't really need the big plays to beat you. They'll come with the big plays, but they don't need the big plays to beat you. They play time of possession football. They know that their defense going to get them a play or two, and that's what we saw on Sunday. Now, Patrick Mahomes, he's had to put on the cape, and we all knew what this team was coming into the season. And a lot of people saying, well, they'll be able to bounce back, but they don't have the home run hitters on offense. And teams are not scared of them, being able to go down the football field. And we saw this in the Super Bowl last season. And I thought it kind of reared itself in this football game. Now, Kansas City dropped the 0-2 on the season. I'm one of those people to go ahead and put it out there. I do think that Rome is burning for them. Because if you look at their schedule coming up, it don't really get easier. So, these are not easy games. You got to play Buffalo. You got to play Baltimore coming up. You got to play Washington, I think, is on their schedule as well, the Commanders. So it's not tough. It's not easy sledding with the schedule that they got coming up. And, we'll see. Patrick, I'm sorry, not Patrick, but Travis Kelce, he's still a good tight end. I don't think he's the elite tight end in the National Football League anymore, but he's still a Pro Bowl caliber type of tight end. But they're going to need more than him, man, with these big-time offenses and what these teams have been able to do surrounding them in the AFC as far as a talent standpoint. And so I'm concerned about the Kansas City Chiefs. So we got to see what they do, man, see if they're able to pick up the pieces moving forward on the season, not where they want to be starting off 0-2 on the year. And then, we had the Sunday night football game, man, between the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings coming off a nice little comeback win against my Chicago Bears. Big primetime matchup, man, but I love what I saw from the Atlanta Falcons from a defensive standpoint. J.J. McCarthy, he looked like a rookie. Yes, indeed, in this football game. Ended up getting nicked up. Looks like he's going to be out for at least a couple of weeks. And so the Falcons, they was able to get off the snide, man, get themselves back to 1-1. I still think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the best team in the NFC South. But, the Falcons, you definitely didn't want to go down 0-2 on the year, losing to a team in the NFC as well. So it was a nice victory, workmanlike type of victory. And Bijan Robinson, man, MVP of the game for me, man, 143 yards on the ground. Just an enigma, man. They need to get him more touches. And so we'll see what the Atlanta offense do moving forward, because I've been impressed by the defense so far this season for them. And that's my look across week number 2 of the National Football League. We definitely had to take you through the ins and outs of week number 2 and what was jumping off. And as I mentioned a little earlier, man, the whole theme of week number 2 was these hurt quarterbacks out here. Teams got to make adjustments, so we'll see what week number 3 do. We got a few new starters going to be, playing for their respective teams. And so we'll break that down, man, as we preview week number 3, man, coming up at the end of the week. But once again, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot. Before we get out of here, we got Major League Baseball that's heading down the home stretch of this season. This has been an interesting season. I think that, Major League Baseball obviously will take a step back when the National Football League show up on the scene. But I think this year is going to be a little different. And the reason why I say that is that we have a bunch of teams and big markets and teams that even the casual baseball fan know. Such as, the New York Yankees is going to get into the playoffs. We got the Los Angeles Dodgers going to get into the playoffs. You got my Chicago Cubs that's going to get into the playoffs. You got, the San Diego Padres in the playoff race going to get into the playoffs. And I think that that's good for baseball. Now, the wild card, it's up in the wild card, meaning that, you can be, put up out of there in the first round. And I think that these wild card games in the playoffs in MLB is probably going to be pound for pound the best wild card round that I've seen since they revamped the playoff system in Major League Baseball. Because you got some heavy hitters. Can't forget about, obviously the Milwaukee Brewers. They're in a little bit of a smaller market than, say, those other teams. But they've been playing some good baseball this season. We got the Detroit Tigers, in that mix, from a, pretty big market. And, there's a lot of good Tiger fans, in the Detroit and surrounding area. So I think it's good for baseball that we do have that. I think that, at one point, they was, batting third as far as just the populace, as far as sports is concerned. Right now, we all know it's no secret, man. Major League Baseball is probably about 4th or 5th. And it's a regional sport. But, the fan bases of these clubs, and me, I'm a baseball head. So fan bases of these clubs, man, is geeked up, man, as we get down to the final stretch of the MLB season. We'll probably put a bow on things maybe in about another week or so, just as far as, my predictions, in the playoffs, once things are kind of sorted in as far as the division winners and so forth. Also want to tip my cap, man, to two gentlemen that it looks like they're running away with the MVP award. First is Mr. Kyle Riley in Seattle, man, for the Mariners, the catcher for the Mariners. He broke, the record for most home runs in a single season by, say, a catcher. Congrats on that. But then this guy just keep on swinging. Now, Riley has a chance, man, to hit 60 homers this season. He got 54 this year. I think that, Seattle, they're in the playoff mix, as well. And I think for that, I think Riley is probably leader in the clubhouse, for the MVP award. Aaron Judge, right there, too. Don't get it twisted. I mean, the man is batting 3 1/4, 48 home runs on the season so far, for Aaron Judge. Looks like he's going to be on his way to, 50 piece again. Shout out to my man, Kyle Big Bat Schwarber, man. Yeah, I said Kyle Big Bat Schwarber because that was the nickname I gave him when he was a Chicago Cub. I dreaded when the Cubs, let him walk up out of the door, got rid of Kyle Schwarber and traded, got him to the Phillies. In Philadelphia, they're in the playoff race as well. Probably the hottest team in the National League, outside the Milwaukee Brewers, obviously. And I think that both these gentlemen deserve it for the MVP award. Ohtani has had a great year, for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He got 49 home runs. He's knocking on the door 50 home runs as well. And so, to me, I think that, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we got these big market teams going to be in the playoffs, going to be especially in that wild card round. I think the wild card round this year for Major League Baseball in the playoffs is going to be exciting this season. So I think you guys definitely may want to, at least check that out, man, once the playoffs jump off. Speaking of playoffs as well, we got the WNBA playoffs that's jumping off right now. It's been a up and down season just from a popular standpoint. A lot of people was upset, when Caitlin Clark, just waved the white flag on the season as, the Indiana Fever. They're in a grudge match, and that grudge match is literally in a few minutes, they take on, the Atlanta Dream. And, they one game away from being eliminated up out of this thing. And the Atlanta Dream has had an outstanding year. They kind of been under the radar, but, people around Atlanta, definitely getting them support. For the Dream, we got the Aces and the Storm playing a little bit later on tonight. And tomorrow we got the Mercury and the Liberty and the Lynx and the Golden State Valkyries, doing their thing tomorrow. So there's a lot of star power just in the first couple of games. You can't forget about Fee Collier for the Lynx. Just Bree Stewart, for the Liberty, the defending WNBA champions, as they take on the Mercury. So it's going to be exciting, man. New York 1-0 in that series, as well as, Minnesota up a game, on the Valkyries just in that series as well. And we have another big 5. And this first 2 weeks of the National Football League season, it's been eventful. We've had a lot of, injuries, with the quarterbacks, just across. Nothing super major, but we got a bunch of quarterbacks who are nicked up right now. So I want to take first 2 weeks to let it marinate a little bit, just kind of see what the sauce looking like, what it do. And so we're going to get right into it, man. We ain't going to hold you. We're going to get right into it at number 5. This team, man, I saw them play over in Brazil, first game of the season. There was a good atmosphere around in Brazil as the Los Angeles Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. This is a team that I predicted to win the AFC West before the season began. There's a lot of people that was kind of, up and down on the Chargers, but Jim, he wins every way he goes. This is a balanced football team. I think this team, to me, the biggest question mark about the Chargers coming into the season, what their defense was going to look like. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the defensive standpoint. I also like that they got a balanced offense, even though, Hampton had an eye game last night. Also, too, Harris, we'll see what Najee Harris do for the Chargers as well this season. But I like the balance. Justin Herbert looks like, he's playing, better football than he did last season, just being under the Jim Harbaugh program. And so I got the Chargers with that big victory last night on Monday Night Football against the Raiders. I got them coming in at number 5. At number 4, this is a team after week number 1. There's a lot of people, a lot of question marks. It's a team that can't finish their food. It's a team that's a front-running team. I still think they got the best roster in the National Football League. And yeah, I'm talking about the Baltimore Ravens. They was able to, handle their business against the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland was talking a lot of junk before the game. It's the AFC North, man. What you expect? But I like what I saw from the offensive standpoint from the Ravens. And then, most importantly, the defense was able to get turnovers, score on turnovers, get to Joe Flacco. And so, to me, the biggest question mark about the Baltimore Ravens, to me, is on the defensive side. I like what they saw, even though it was Cleveland. They was able to show that they were able to bounce back after that debacle in week number 1. They got the, two-time minted MVP of the league and Lamar Jackson. So we'll see what the Ravens do. But I got them coming in at number 4. At number 3, this is a team that I'm still on wait and see. But I got to put a little respect on their name so far because the defense is looking real good. I mean, real good. And I'm talking about the Green Bay Packers, man. There's a lot of question marks about Jordan Love, me being one of those guys just to see if he can get up into kind of another tier level as far as quarterback is concerned. The man has played clean football. Shout out to the offensive line of the Green Bay Packers, man. I mean, this man is literally untouched basically through 2 games. And the defense is just ratcheting it up. They had another huge win, man. So they, leader in the clubhouse in the NFC North. And yeah, I've got the Green Bay Packers, man, coming in at number 3. They still got some more to prove to me, but so far so good. Big time, win, for them, with the Packers and the Commanders. So 2 playoff teams they're able to knock off through the first 2 weeks. I can't hate on them, man. I got them coming in at number 3. At number 2, this is a team that we saw them in week number 1. Had they got put on the cape. And Josh Allen get out of that whole situation with the Baltimore Ravens. We saw him last week be able to handle that lightweight in the New York Jets. Impressive win, say for the Bills as well. I got him coming in at number 2. I still think with the Buffalo Bills is that at the end of the day, the receiving corps from the Buffalo Bills, they got to be able to be consistent because it can't be all Josh Allen. And shout out to James Cook, too. He had a big-time run, too, on Sunday for James Cook. He had an outstanding game. I think over 100 plus 30, over 130 yards in the game. I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm liking the balance. It's just guys like Keon Coleman and guys like Josh Palmer, guys like Dalton Kincaid. I just want to see a little bit more consistency out of those guys and, just them scheming up the game plan, man, to get them, the ball a little bit more and not put it all on Josh Allen. Liking the defense a little bit as well from the Buffalo Bills. We'll see what they do moving forward, man. I got them coming in at number 2. At number 1, this is a team that they got the belt. It's the Philadelphia Eagles. They got the belt. They got through the first 2 weeks of the season and went and handled that business out in Kansas City, 20-17 against the Chiefs. They was able to beat the Dallas Cowboys in week number 1, even though, a lot of people, they should have been able to, just DDT the Dallas Cowboys. Whoa, pump your brakes. This is week number 1, man. They best defensive player didn't play the entire game, and Jalen Carter with the whole situation with Dak Prescott. Slow your roll. Jalen Hurts playing good football once again. Don't have to do much. I do want to see a little bit more involvement for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Please, for A.J. Brown's sake, man. I got him on my fantasy squad. You're killing me out here. But anyway, I do think that they need to kind of move the ball a little bit more traditional as far as getting those guys touches early in the game. Saquon Barkley is a man-child. This team is balanced. I'm keeping a quote-unquote eagle eye on this defense, though, from the Philadelphia Eagles because they had some departures in free agency. I'm not sure if it's going to kill them. We'll see what it do as the season move forward. But that's my big 5 power rankings, man, National Football League through week number 2. And first and foremost, man, I appreciate you guys rocking with me, checking me out. As I said a little bit earlier, man, it's your first time listening. We coming twice a week. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. Sometimes 3 times a week if it's really cracking out here, man. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. To my OGs, once again, let's get it in. I'll see you guys, man, towards the end of the week before we get into the weekend slate across the sporting landscape. Once again, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast.